me to tell if there's anything haunting you. You leave without saying where you're going or where to. Should I worry that you won't come back? Should I worry that you will forget? My senses telling me I shouldn't worry and know the truth. Ooh, yeah. I can never take away our story now. And I know you feel it too, our story, it's too precious now. Yeah. I can never take away our story now. We come too far to waste our story, it's our story now.
Let's go.
So hello and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to a Dirt 2.0 video. Now, as you can see, we're looking at my Renault 5 GT Turbo from back in the 90s, a real love affair I had with this car, so where better to start coming back to this game in the Renault 5 GT Turbo. Now we're going to be taking a look at the Ribadels circuit in Spain, or stage, and the Subida por carretra region. So we're going to start out with a 2:12 lap, and I'm just going to try and talk you through each of these sections as to what I think was wrong with the car and how it was handling. So straight off the back, there's just too much rotation from the rear, losing far too much grip from the rear end of the car, always under acceleration. The rear end's really wanting to step out. Doesn't feel too planted through the front either, getting quite a bit of understeer on corner entry. The brakes aren't particularly turning the car as much as I'd like, although we're just getting a bit of snap oversteer, snap understeer. It's not particularly feeling very planted at all. As you can see, I'm trying to learn the circuit as well, so I'm coming down a little bit too early for some of these corners and not carrying enough speed, especially through this one, far too close to the left hand side going into the turn itself. A little bit of a kick of oversteer, not too bad actually through that section, but still just coming down through the gears far too early in these stages. It's almost like each of these corners requires a little bit of a gear change as the speed sort of starts to drop off through that section, and then again we start to pick up the speed. So still not sure through this stage whether I should actually be coming down through the gears, but especially when you're going such high speeds, you really need to be having some sort of acceleration on, even though you're actually trying to slow the car down, because you're trying to create grip through the rear wheels through acceleration. There's nothing worse than going into a corner without any sort of acceleration on and the car just freewheeling. So as you can see, just being a little bit too tentative through this section. It might appear to look fairly fast, but this is nowhere near the sort of speeds you need to be hitting to set really fast lap times. Again, just running a little bit wide through here, still a bit scruffy, not particularly getting a good line, and not being able to get the car balanced through that section to get it flat out really. And it's still probably the hardest section for me, because you end up doing the first sections over and over. So starting out with a 2:12 lap. So just in between this and the next lap we're going to look at, I thought I'd have a little look at the leaderboards just to see how fast people are actually going, and finding myself all the way down in the 200s with a 2:10. I start to wonder just how fast people have actually gone. So I get a little bit curious and make my way all the way up to the top of the leaderboard to see that someone's gone into the 158s, which is absolutely blinding lap. So I think, yep, I've definitely got my work cut out, but it certainly would be nice to hit a top 10 lap time, which is what this video is all about, to be honest. It's how I actually get into that top 10, and just the steps that I'm going to go through to just attack the circuit and try and adjust the setup so it suits the circuit more. So let's get into the next lap. So obviously as we start to move into the 209s now, it's all a case of learning the circuit really. Obviously you can see I've got the co-driver turned off, and I never really get to grips with rally games listening to the co-driver. I just prefer to do these shorter stages, so it's almost just like learning the circuit. Obviously you've learned tracks like the Nordschleife, which is in almost 8 minutes in some cars. It's quite a long track to learn, so these little short tracks should really be relatively easy without the co-driver. Just a case of repetition and just trying to find quicker lines through the corners, thinking about where you're positioning the car. It's very much a case of knowing sort of what corners coming next. As you can see, it's still a little bit scruffy here, too much contact with the barriers, too much of a kick of oversteer through certain sections, especially this one, far too sideways, almost wiping out on the rear end of the rocks there. And again, just not carrying the speed through here just yet. Still trying to find the lines, still trying to understand how to get the best line through this corner. And obviously the car's not particularly set up right just yet. I'm still not getting anywhere enough rear traction coming through some of the corners. And as you can see from some of these beautiful slow motion replays coming through this section, certainly had its issues trying to carry as much speed as you can coming through there, especially with being off the throttle sometimes, wondering whether to go into fourth gear or stay in fifth gear. Coming through this section was a bit of a blind one really, whether I was going to get through carrying as much speed as I thought I could carry. So yeah, it's not without fault. I am still only human when I'm trying to set these laps, and it is a case of just pushing the car to the limit, trying to find where you can get away with carrying more speed. You know, almost just we're hitting the wall there. I'm still not carrying enough speed through here, still not taking enough grass on the left hand side there. And again, just I weren't sure really how to line the car up through this section, just to miss the signs on the right hand side as you come through there. Again, just getting really scruffy out on the right hand side of the circuit there, not getting the car slowed down quick enough. And again, carrying the speed through this corner, just making too many corrections, not being able to get the car to rotate really under acceleration to the best of its ability, but still managing a 209 lap. And then starting to move on really with the setup. Really, this is where it all begins to get a little bit more complicated, I guess. So looking through the setup, I'm trying to get a little bit more grip from the rear end. So I'm starting to think about adding a little bit of negative camber to the rear, and also looking at other areas of the setup. Obviously there's a positive on the front, not sure that that's quite enough. Obviously the turning, I was wanting to get a little bit more rotation from the car, so just brought the brake bias a little bit more towards the rear end, and just wondering about whether I can actually lower the car, how much lower I can get away with it. Remember, this is probably the first time I've gone about trying to do a setup for a car in Dirt Rally, so I'm not really sure how to gauge things at the moment as to how much effect they're going to have. So just trying to think about running a softer setup or a harder setup on the suspension, but still keeping it fairly soft, not going fully hard. And again, I think I'd done a session here, I'd gone out and done a few laps and found that there was just too much rear camber. Maybe I was losing a little bit of straight line speed, coming back in, still just not getting enough rotation through the car. So this was a few sessions where I've come back to the car, maybe the final drive on the car, I was topping out quite a bit in fifth gear, so I'm starting to look at extending the final drive or lowering the final drive. A few things that I'm just looking at really on how I can adjust them to help better the car. See, I've come back in and I'm just softening out that spring. Obviously you're not being able to see these effects, but gradually you'll see this effect in the next attempt. Obviously I decide I can lower the car even further. What else am I looking at? The locking, obviously the drive lock. So let's just see how this goes. So when we're coming away from the line here, it's just looking at first and second really, the gears that are going to propel the car off the line, and then third coming through here, fifth or up to fourth, and certainly looking a lot tighter through the front end. Not so much of a kick of oversteer coming out of that corner, and just being able to keep the front end of the car much tighter in so you can get on the accelerator much faster coming out of the corner. Coming through here, that seems quite nice. Able to keep the car nice and stable. Front end's turning in a little bit better. Still, there's nowhere near as much kick on the oversteer coming out of the corners. Still running probably a little bit too wide through there, and still coming far too close on the left hand side coming into there. It's more of a sweeping out from the right hand side across really, but yeah, it doesn't look too bad through this section. Still not getting this section hooked up just the way it needs to be really. It's sort of a drop down through the gears as we come through each of them, and just being able to carry more speed. Still hitting the barrier on the exit there. It's a very hard corner to get right coming out of that section, and this is probably one of the most important sections because it's such a fast section of the circuit. You really want to carry as much speed through there as you can. I know in the final one I actually do drop down into fourth and to fifth, but it would be so much better to stay in fifth gear through this whole section. Just a tiny drop into fourth through one of the brakes. Still not cutting anywhere near enough curve through this section, and still not carrying anywhere near enough speed through here in fourth gear. Coming down to this last section here, just seeing if the car hooks up much better through there. Just a little kick on the oversteer, and just a bit too tentative through this section. Still not being able to hook this up properly, I don't think. Yeah, just finishing out the lap then. So a 2:07, but much nicer, much more balanced. So I just decided to go straight back in and do another run. The car did feel pretty good. Made a tiny adjustment on the final drive, and I think it's evident a little bit further into the lap, but you can see the car's hooking up quite nicely. Tiny little kick of oversteer, I think, coming off this next corner, but still managing to get that front end turned in quite nicely. Still not got this corner perfect. Needs a real stab of the brake just to chuck that front end in a little bit more, get the front end to grip. And coming through this section seems a little bit nicer, a little bit sweeter on the turn in. But this section was far better. You'll see the difference. Just trying to keep to the right hand side through this section here, just allow you to brake here and then get the car turned in. It was a much better turning on that one. Managed to carry much more speed through here, no stupid kick of oversteer, but I'm still just dropping down too early into fourth gear through this section. But this is more like it really, just dropping down through the gears as you come through here. I managed to get a much better run out of this corner without clipping the barrier that time. So obviously this section is really important, and you can see I'm just bouncing on the limiter here. So fifth gear definitely needs looking at once again, and just dropping down into fifth and fourth and back up into fifth. And it's just too short, fifth gear. I'm just bouncing on the limiter far too early through that section. But this one looks a lot better hooked up, being able to carry a lot more speed. Still not cutting enough on the grass through this section, but it certainly seems a little bit better hooked up through here, just carrying a lot more speed. And obviously it's evident when I cross the line. This next section, still just a bit too tentative. I don't seem to be able to get the car to rotate under acceleration. I'm having to sort of mess with the brake and the accelerator and the brake just to get the car rotated. I don't really think you need the handbrake at all on this section, on this stage of the circuit. But yeah, into the 205s. Well, just as we get further into this, just a few more of these slow-mo crashes. Seeing me coming out of the town complex, just carrying way too much speed, hooking up with the lamppost and then the tree. And there's so many obstacles on this circuit that you're trying to avoid. Barriers, rocks, little divots, and just carrying. If you're not crashing, you're not going fast enough, in my opinion. You really need to find as much of the limit of this car as possible, and just the tiniest clip can end in some of the most amazing of crashes. Anyway, let's carry on. So in this section, this might seem all too familiar for a lot of people when they go into a lobby and they decide to load up the fastest driver that's available, and they download the Ghost, and everything becomes apparent as soon as they actually start the race or start the time trial. It's a case of, how the hell is he going so fast? And this was definitely an eye-opener for me when I loaded up Alex's fastest Ghost, and he really has got this car set up to perfection. I really don't know how he's got it set up, and I don't know where he gets so much traction, but I loaded up the previous day's setup and sort of start from there with this, and this was one of the most tedious things that I've ever done in any sim racing game, really, was to try and find out where the hell I am so slow. So starting out, I've got a 204 lap, and I'm thinking, yeah, I just need to iron out a few issues here. But instantly, we've gone nearly 2 or 3 turns here, and he's pulling out car lengths on me just by the second here. And I'm thinking there is definitely something fundamentally wrong in the setup that I've got for me to be so far behind. You only need to add the distance that we've travelled in that short space of time out throughout the entire lap, and it's quite obvious where I'm losing 5 seconds. So going into each one of these every time, I'm making the tiniest of adjustments, coming back out and seeing what a difference it's made. And obviously straight away you can see the Ghost is just pulling away once again. And this is going to be the biggest issue that you find with sim racing in every single platform or every single game that you come across, is just how different these effects make a difference to the car, make a difference to the performance. Even just the tiniest of clicks can have quite an impact sometimes. They're only small figures that were moving these sliders, but they do make a huge difference to how the cars are performing. Now obviously the main issue that I can see with what's going off here is just how much acceleration he's getting. Now whether that's an issue to do with how much camber I'm running or how much suspension I'm running, whether I can get the same amount of grip that he's got. You've got the roll in the car, whether it's generating more grip as he's cornering, whether the rear cambers are leaning over more and getting more grip to the circuit whilst he's going through the corners. But there's so many variables that are going to be sort of working against you or either working with you. It's very hard to find which one of those is going to help you, really. It's very hard to look at one area of the car and just think, yes, that's what the issue is. It's a very laborious task going through all these things and just really figuring out what is wrong. So the only way you can go about it really is to move the sliders one way, try a little run, see what difference it makes going. Obviously we've gone a lot firmer on the anti-roll bars here, we've got a lot firmer on the suspension. Am I any closer than I previous was? Obviously we're getting loads of oversteer now, so is that really the best thing? So coming just straight back into the setup and let's go for making it a heck of a lot softer. Just bringing the suspension almost all the way down and then having a little bit of a think about it. Obviously we're going to try and make the rear end softer than the front because this is a rear wheel drive car, which you would usually try to do. So then again, going back out, putting the car through its paces once again, and I just can't believe that he's so far ahead, even after just a few corners. It really was starting to get very frustrating. The car wasn't performing anywhere near as well as it had done on the previous day, so I'm starting to increase things that probably seem a little bit unorthodox, really, because I'm just trying to understand where things are changing within the game itself. You know, are they making a big impact with small adjustments, or are they making very little impact with big adjustments? And you can see here, I just can't fathom really. You can even see my Ghost from the previous day. is getting further ahead. So even the previous setup that I had on the car was actually faster than what I've currently got through the adjustments that I've made. So sometimes it's a case of literally just going back to the drawing board and just starting again with the whole thing. Just load up the days before setup and just work from there. So that's really what I'm going to end up doing. As I do persevere with this for a little bit more and go through so many permutations, but I think it's best if we just go back to the drawing board and start from there, and just understand that small increment changes can have huge effects, but some big increment changes can have very little effects. It's a very tough decision to make when you're trying to set a car up, which area to try and attack best. But you've just got to take the car out each time and look at how it's handling and just try and work on the issues that you've got, and obviously traction and cornering ability, losing the rear end, oversteer, getting the car to perform front end grip more, getting it to turn. All these things are issues, and sometimes some people are just better at setting up cars than you are, or some people have got better skill levels when it comes to driving, and his setup might be way off what you'd like, but he's managing to make it work. But yeah, I think we just reset on the day and go with the previous day's setup, and that was the best way I found that I was able to progress, just going back, taking a few steps back in this setup and just going back to the previous day. So I eventually found a setup that worked much better and managed to set a fantastic lap. I'll let you enjoy it at full volume. So finally hitting a 202, a very challenging lap to get anywhere near Alex Billy Tenier's lap time. An amazing 158, it truly is, and the car's set up beautifully. But looking over the split times, just losing 4 tenths in that first sector, a couple of tenths in the middle sector, but his third sector is absolutely blinding. So let's wrap things up by looking over this final setup. Obviously, going straight into the tyre section, we're only going to be using the soft compound tyre. It just offers so much more grip than any of the other tyres, I initially thought it might have been an issue with the tyres, but definitely the soft tyre. Front, we're going to have a little bit of negative toe just to get the car to turn in, a little bit more response from the front end of the car. And the camber angles absolutely maxed out on both the rear and the front, and the toe angle at the rear just to try and get that car accelerating nicely in a straight line really. But definitely needing so much rear grip in this car, I definitely had to max out the negative camber on the rear. Moving on to the brake balance or brake force, definitely something that you're going to choose that yourself, but the bias itself just moved to 63, definitely moving more rearward to get the car to rotate under braking. The drive lock, just to stop the car oversteering too much on corner exit, something that was hugely apparent in the Renault, and the high preload just to try and get more traction through the middle of the corner, more grip, and also the brake locking or coast lock. Just to try and get the car not to rotate too much. Now the gears was a massive point in this setup. Every gear is very much positioned for each corner. Obviously you've got gears 1 and 2 doing the acceleration off the line, gears 3 and 4 very much throughout the entire circuit, and the 5th gear down the very long straights at the back. As for the final drive, it doesn't really pay too much difference because of all the changes throughout the gears. Now the bump and rebound, definitely found that the softer setup, because of so much undulation through this circuit, running a firm setup really doesn't work. The ride height's bottomed out as far as it's going to go, and one thing that made a massive difference was the anti-roll bars, setting these to firm. A fairly soft spring setup through the suspension itself, but the AR or the ARB anti-roll bars made a massive difference to this setup. So with the video almost over, let's just take a drive around this circuit and point out a few issues. Obviously, setting off from the line, you're going to want to be absolutely nailing that throttle, and then just releasing the handbrake in first gear, all the way up to third through here. Hold third gear as you're coming through this section, and then just as we come into this corner, the car sort of waves around a bit on entry here, and it's the tiniest of lifts on entry into this corner. Up into fourth gear through this section, and then trying to get the car nice and straight, braking in a straight line and turning the car in, dropping down into third gear, trying to keep a really nice and tight apex, accelerating out up into fourth gear, and again braking in a straight line down into third gear, and just trying to hug this inside curb and get it on the power as soon as you can. All the way up into fourth gear as we come down here, and we're sort of going to be braking halfway through this turn, really stab of the brake, get the car twisted and turned into a straight line, and then accelerating hard into third gear, all the way up here, just as we come over the rise there, dropping down into third gear, throwing the car in and trying to take as tight a line as possible through that corner, accelerating out, use all the width of the road going out onto the right hand side or left hand side, and then braking down into third gear, and then just really hooking up the inside curb here, getting across onto the right hand side, and then a real stab of the brake again, throw the car in, and then up into fourth gear as soon as you can through there, hugging out wide on the left hand side to get a nice line through and flat out down this entire section. Now we're going to carry fifth gear all the way through here, and then just dropping down into fourth gear, take a stab of the brake pedal, throw it in, down into third gear, keeping in third all the way through here. And then we're going to start to want to accelerate out. Try not to hit any of that Alco barrier on the right hand side, but it's very hard. Up into fifth gear, all the way through the tiniest of lifts, and then back on the throttle. Just a really light throttle through here. You could drop down into fourth gear, then back up into fifth gear. But if you can hold on to fifth gear through there, just with the tiniest of acceleration, it might be a bit faster. Dropping down into fourth gear for this left-hander, and then back on the accelerator as soon as you can, obviously without clipping any of those barriers. Up into fifth gear, and then as we come into the town, dropping down into fourth gear, taking all that grass, dropping down again into third gear, tighten up the line through here, getting nice and tight on the right hand side, and then flooring it in fourth gear all the way through here, absolutely maxed out, as close on the left hand side as you can get. Dropping down into second gear, hugging up the left hand side, take a nice tight line through there, and again just up into third, then down into second gear, accelerating hard around here, trying to get the wheels spinning. It's very hard to get that nailed perfectly in a section that I'd really do miss out on. But carrying third gear around this corner and then across the line, a hugely demanding circuit, but very rewarding. So thanks for watching as always. If you've enjoyed the video, please do hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, smash that like button. But I'll leave you with the replay, and thanks for watching as always, and ciao for now.